The only sound in the cavernous corner office was the frantic whirring of the high-end printer as it choked on its own ambition. Paper jam again. Arnold Reeves stared at the sleek, expensive machine, currently spitting out error messages like confetti at a pity party. He'd been wrestling with it for 10 minutes, the critical contracts for the Henderson merger deadline looming like a thunderhead. Sweat prickled at his temple beneath his carefully styled dark hair. "Problem, Reeves?" The voice, cool and precise, cut through the mechanical distress. Julian Thorne stood in the doorway, impeccably tailored, in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Arnold's monthly rent. He radiated an aura of controlled power, his sharp blue eyes missing nothing. CEO of Thorne Industries, Arnold's boss, and the source of a low-level, persistent hum of anxiety that had lived in Arnold's chest since he started as his executive assistant 6 months ago. Arnold straightened, wiping his hands on his trousers. "Just a stubborn paper jam, Mr. Thorne. I'll have it sorted in a moment." He forced calm into his voice, the one he reserved for boardroom prep and defusing Julian's rare moments of impatience. He knelt back down, fingers probing the guts of the machine, acutely aware of Julian's presence filling the doorway. "It's the Henderson contracts," Julian stated, stepping fully into the room. He didn't hover, but moved with quiet purpose to his massive mahogany desk, placing down a folio. "The courier leaves in 40 minutes. They need to be perfect." No pressure, Arnold thought, suppressing a sigh. He found the culprit, a mangled corner of thick bond paper wedged deep. "Almost got it, sir?" He tugged gently, feeling the paper resist, then give way with a soft rip. He extracted the crumpled offender, fed fresh paper into the tray, and hit the resume button. The printer whirred back to life, spitting out pristine pages. "Efficient as always, Reeves," Julian remarked, not looking up as he scanned a document on his desk. His tone was neutral, factual. Compliments from Julian Thorne were rare birds, never ostentatious, always grounded in observable competence. Arnold felt a flicker of warmth anyway, quickly stamped down. Professional distance, always. He gathered the freshly printed contracts, meticulously collating and stapling them. "All set, Mr. Thorne. I'll have them packaged for the courier immediately." Good. Julian finally looked up, his gaze landing on Arnold. It wasn't the assessing look he gave spreadsheets or proposals. It lingered for a fraction too long, sweeping over Arnold's crisp white shirt, the focused line of his brow, the slight sheen of effort still on his temple. Arnold felt pinned, scrutinized in a way that felt different. He busied himself with the documents. "Reeves," Julian began, his voice losing a sliver of its usual crispness. "The board dinner tonight, my notes on the quarterly projections." He trailed off, rubbing his temple with long fingers. Arnold noticed the slight tremor in the hand, the faint shadows under Julian's eyes that even expensive tailoring couldn't hide. The Henderson merger was taking its toll on everyone, but Julian carried the weight alone. "They're compiled and formatted on your tablet, sir, ready for review," Arnold supplied smoothly, placing the packaged contracts on the edge of Julian's desk. "Key points highlighted, potential questions anticipated. I also confirmed your 7:30 p.m. reservation at Le Claret and ensured the driver will be ready at 7:15. Julian stared at him, a complex expression flickering across his usually impassive face. Surprise, relief, and something else Arnold couldn't decipher. Weariness? Gratitude? You anticipated the notes needed for tonight?" His voice was softer, almost wondering. Arnold kept his expression neutral, though his heart gave a traitorous thump. "Standard preparation for a board dinner agenda item, sir, based on the preliminary notes you shared yesterday afternoon." He'd actually stayed an hour late cross-referencing data, knowing Julian's mind would be fractured by merger stress. Julian leaned back slightly in his imposing chair, the leather sighing. He didn't speak for a moment. His gaze drifted past Arnold to the rain-streaked window overlooking the city skyline. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken strain. "Standard," he echoed, almost to himself. Then his eyes snapped back to Arnold, sharp and intense. "There's nothing standard about the way you operate, Reeves. You see 3 steps ahead. You anticipate needs I haven't even articulated." He paused, the intensity deepening. "It's invaluable." The raw honesty in the compliment, the directness of his gaze, threw Arnold completely off balance. His carefully constructed professional wall wobbled. I just try to do my job effectively, Mr. Thorne," he managed, his voice tighter than intended. Julian held his gaze, the blue of his eyes seeming darker, more turbulent in the office's muted light. "Effectively is an understatement." He looked down at his hands, flexing them slightly, as if dispelling the tremor Arnold had noticed. "This merger—" He stopped. A rare moment of vulnerability Arnold had never witnessed. Julian Thorne didn't do vulnerability. "It requires absolute precision, absolute focus. And lately, focus feels elusive." He looked up again, his gaze locking onto Arnold's with startling directness. "Knowing you're handling the details, it's the only thing keeping the wheels from coming off some days." The admission landed like a physical blow. Arnold stood frozen, the packaged contracts suddenly heavy in his hands. He saw the genuine strain etched on Julian's face, the weight of the empire he carried. The powerful CEO suddenly looked human, mortal. And Arnold felt an absurd, dangerous urge to step closer, to offer something. Comfort? Support? It was wildly inappropriate. I just try to do my job effectively, Mr. Thorne," he stammered, retreating behind formality, the only safe ground he knew. "I'll ensure these are dispatched right away." He turned to leave, needing air, needing distance from the crack he had seen in Julian's formidable facade and the unsettling feelings it stirred within himself. "Arnold." The use of his first name stopped him cold at the door. He turned slowly. Julian hadn't moved, but his gaze was fixed on him, intense and searching. The air hummed with unspoken tension. "Thank you," Julian said, the words simple but weighted. "Truly." He paused, his eyes holding Arnold's, stripping away the layers of job titles and corporate hierarchy for a suspended, breathless moment. Arnold's breath hitched. "I see you." The words resonated far deeper than any compliment about his efficiency. They felt like an acknowledgement of the person behind the perfectly organized calendar and the preemptive notes. He managed a stiff nod, his throat tight. "Of course, Mr. Thorne." He fled the office before his own facade could crack. The echo of Julian's words, "I see you," and the image of his weary, grateful eyes burning in Arnold's mind. The contract was secure, the printer defeated, but Arnold felt like he was the one suddenly jammed, caught between the rigid structure of his professional life and the terrifying, undeniable pull of something else entirely. The board dinner notes were ready. Arnold Reeves was anything but. The morning after Julian's unnerving gratitude dawned gray and heavy, matching the weight sitting low in Arnold's gut. He arrived at the office impossibly early, the cavernous space silent except for the hum of dormant electronics. He needed the buffer, the quiet before the storm of Julian Thorne's relentless energy. He busied himself with meticulous tasks, aligning pens on Julian's desk, refreshing the water carafe, reviewing the day's brutal schedule, back-to-back calls, the Henderson final negotiation prep, a working lunch with investors who smelled blood in the water.
When Julian arrived, precisely at 7:30 a.m., he carried the storm with him. The vulnerability of the previous afternoon was gone, replaced by a razor-sharp intensity that crackled in the air. His movements were precise, economical, his gaze focused and distant. He barely acknowledged Arnold's quiet, "Good morning, Mr. Thorne," with a curt nod, already scanning the documents Arnold had placed center stage on his desk. The day unfolded like a high-wire act performed in a hurricane. Arnold was the net, the balancing pole, the steadying hand Julian never asked for but desperately needed. He intercepted calls, rerouted schedule conflicts, anticipated data requests before Julian could snap his fingers, and absorbed the brunt of his boss's frayed nerves with stoic calm. Julian's temper, usually icy and controlled, flashed hot once when a junior analyst fumbled a projection. Arnold smoothly stepped in, deflecting Julian's ire with calm professionalism and presenting the corrected figures himself, earning a terse "proceed" from Julian, whose knuckles were white where they gripped the edge of his desk. During a rare 5-minute gap between calls, Arnold entered the office with fresh coffee, black, no sugar, precisely as Julian took it during high-stress periods. Julian was standing by the window, staring out at the now torrential rain lashing the city. His shoulders were rigid, the line of his back taut as a bowstring. He didn't turn as Arnold placed the cup silently on the desk. "Reeves," Julian said, his voice rough, still facing the downpour. "The Henderson Clause 7B revisions. Did legal return them?" "They came in 15 minutes ago, sir," Arnold replied, retrieving the printed document from his own meticulously organized folder. "I've highlighted the key changes and potential friction points. They softened the liability language slightly, but the core protections are intact." He placed the document beside the coffee. Julian finally turned. The exhaustion Arnold had glimpsed yesterday was back, etched deeper into the lines around his eyes. He looked at the coffee, then at the highlighted document, then finally at Arnold. His gaze wasn't assessing this time. It was weary, grateful, haunted. "You read it already?" he asked, his voice rough. "Skimmed it efficiently, sir. Enough to brief you." Arnold kept his voice neutral, but the intensity of Julian's look was unnerving. It felt like being seen through, not just seen. Julian picked up the coffee, taking a long, bracing sip. He closed his eyes for a second, as if drawing strength from the bitter liquid. "Efficient," he murmured, opening his eyes and fixing them back on Arnold. He walked back to his desk, the storm outside mirroring the one within him. He picked up the document, but didn't open it. Instead, he leaned his palms flat on the polished wood, head bowed slightly. "Sometimes, Reeves," he said, his voice low, almost lost in the drumming rain, "I feel like I'm trying to bail out the Titanic with a teaspoon, and the damn ship is actively trying to sink." He let out a short, humorless breath. "Knowing you're here, holding the other teaspoon, it's the only thing keeping my head above water."
The raw honesty, the sheer need in his voice, hit Arnold like a physical force. It was far more dangerous than yesterday's compliment. Yesterday was appreciation. This was dependence. It blurred lines Arnold had spent years carefully etching in stone. He saw the tremor in Julian's hands again, more pronounced now. "Sir," Arnold began, his own voice tight, "the Henderson team is strong. The fundamentals are sound. It's the final stretch pressure." "I know the fundamentals, Reeves," Julian snapped, straightening abruptly, his control momentarily fracturing. He ran a hand through his hair, disheveling its usual perfection. He stopped himself, visibly clamping down on the outburst. He took another deep breath, his gaze locking onto Arnold's again, the blue eyes turbulent. "Forgive me. That was uncalled for." He gestured helplessly at the room, the rain, the mountain of work. "The divorce settlement. It's final today." The words dropped like stones into the tense silence. Arnold knew vaguely, from discreetly managing Julian's calendar for months, that divorce proceedings were ongoing. But the finality of it, landing amidst the Henderson maelstrom, it explained the brittle edge, the deeper shadows, the uncharacteristic vulnerability. I'm sorry to hear that, Mr. Thorne, Arnold said, the platitude feeling woefully inadequate. What did you say to your formidable, emotionally guarded boss about the collapse of his marriage? Julian waved a dismissive hand, but the gesture lacked conviction. Don't be. It's been protracted. Necessary. Just lousy timing. He picked up the Henderson document, his knuckles white. Focus on Henderson. That's what matters now. He sounded like he was trying to convince himself. The day ground on. The tension didn't dissipate. It just shifted form, becoming a heavy, shared weight. Arnold moved with even greater precision, anticipating Julian's needs before the strain could trigger another outburst. He became a silent buffer, fielding calls, managing interruptions, his presence a steadying constant in Julian's increasingly turbulent world. He saw Julian watching him sometimes, not with professional assessment, but with a kind of dazed, exhausted reliance that both unnerved and tugged at something deep within Arnold. Finally, at 8:47 p.m., the last Henderson negotiation call ended. Julian leaned back in his chair, the fight momentarily gone out of him, replaced with a profound weariness. The office was dark, except for the pool of light from his desk lamp and the city's neon glow reflecting off the rain-slicked windows. The downpour hadn't eased. Arnold stood quietly by the door, holding Julian's overnight bag, packed for an early flight to the final signing tomorrow. Your car is ready downstairs, Mr. Thorne. Flight details and the finalized Henderson packet are in the folio inside your bag. Your 7 a.m. briefing with legal is confirmed. Julian didn't move for a long moment. He just sat there, staring at nothing, looking utterly exhausted. Then he slowly pushed himself up. Right. Thank you, Reeves. He walked around the desk, stopping near Arnold. He looked smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of the day and the personal milestone marked with silence and paperwork. He reached for the bag. Their fingers brushed. It was the briefest contact, the cool leather of the bag handle, the warmth of Julian's skin. Arnold felt it like an electric jolt, a spark jumping the gap in the heavy silence. Julian froze, his hand still touching Arnold's for a fraction of a second longer than necessary. His eyes, shadowed and impossibly weary, lifted to meet Arnold's. In that suspended moment, the professional distance evaporated. Arnold saw not the CEO, but the man, vulnerable, hurting, exhausted beyond measure. He saw the gratitude, the dependence, and something else, raw and unguarded, that made Arnold's breath catch. The rain hammered against the windows, a relentless percussion, underscoring the sudden and dangerous intimacy of the silence. Julian cleared his throat, the sound rough in the quiet room. He took the bag, his fingers deliberately avoiding Arnold's this time. You should get home, Reeves. It's late. His voice was low, strained.
Arnold nodded, unable to speak past the sudden tightness in his throat. Yes, sir. Julian walked towards the door, then paused, silhouetted against the dim light from the outer office corridor. He didn't turn back. Arnold? He said, his voice barely above a whisper, carrying back into the quiet office. Thank you. For today. For everything. He hesitated, the silence stretching thin. I don't know how I'd... He stopped, the sentence hanging unfinished, heavy with unspoken meaning. I don't know how I'd get through this without you. Then he was gone, the sound of his footsteps fading down the hall. Arnold stood alone in the dark office, the echo of his first name, spoken with such quiet intensity, ringing in his ears, mingling with the drumming rain. The brush of fingers, The exhaustion in Julian's eyes, the raw vulnerability, the unfinished sentence. The carefully constructed wall between boss and employee felt like it had been washed away in the downpour. He picked up his own bag, his hand trembling slightly. The Henderson deal was nearly done, but the far more complex, dangerous negotiation between Arnold Reeves and Julian Thorne had just entered uncharted, storm-swept territory. The drive home, through the rain-lashed city, promised to be a long one.
The rain hadn't stopped. It drummed a relentless rhythm against Arnold's apartment window, mirroring the anxious thrum in his chest. Sleep had been a fragmented, elusive thing, filled with images of Julian's exhausted eyes, the tremor in his hands, the raw weight of his whispered Arnold, ... and the unfinished sentence hanging in the dark office air. I don't know how I'd ... He arrived at the office even earlier than usual, the pre-dawn gloom matching his internal state. The Henderson signing was today, finality, relief, and a terrifying precipice for whatever fragile, unspoken thing had cracked open between him and Julian Thorne. He moved through the silent space with practiced efficiency, but his focus was fractured. He prepped the boardroom, laid out the final signing documents with surgical precision, confirmed the car for the airport, all while hyper-aware of the door to Julian's office, still closed and dark. What would the morning bring? The cool, impenetrable CEO? Or the shattered man from last night? Julian arrived precisely at 7 a.m. Arnold heard the sharp click of dress shoes on marble, the decisive rhythm back in force. He braced himself as Julian strode into the main office area, heading straight for his own door. "Morning, Reeves," Julian stated, his voice crisp, professional, devoid of the ragged edges from the night before. He didn't pause, didn't look at Arnold directly, just offered the greeting like a bullet point on an agenda. "Good morning, Mr. Thorne," Arnold replied, matching the tone, relief warring with a strange pang of disappointment. The armor was firmly back in place. Arnold followed him into the office with the essential briefing packet. Julian was already at his desk, powering up his laptop, his movements sharp, controlled. He looked immaculate, suit pristine, hair perfectly styled, the shadows under his eyes expertly concealed. Only the unnatural tightness around his mouth betrayed any residual strain. "The final Henderson documents, sir." Arnold placed the folder. On the desk, flight confirmation. "Car departs for Teterboro at 8:15 a.m. Weather en route is clear. Legal team will meet you airside for final review before boarding." Efficient, Julian acknowledged, finally looking up. His blue eyes were clear, focused but distant. The vulnerability was locked away, replaced by the familiar, intimidating intensity. "Any fires to put out before I leave? None requiring your attention, sir?" "All contingencies covered." Arnold hesitated, then added, "The forecast in Chicago is clear but cold. Packed your overcoat." A flicker of something surprise crossed Julian's face, quickly masked. "Good. Thank you." He opened the folder, his gaze already scanning the top page, effectively dismissing Arnold. Arnold turned to leave, the professional wall feeling higher and colder than ever. He'd almost reached the door when Julian spoke again, his voice slightly less clipped. "Reeves." Arnold turned back. "Sir?" Julian wasn't looking at him. He was staring at a spot near the window. "Last night, ... He paused, choosing his words with visible care. ... was unprofessional. "My ... lapse. It won't happen again." He finally met Arnold's eyes, his expression unreadable. "I appreciate your discretion." The dismissal was clear, the boundary violently redrawn. Lapse. The word stung, reducing the raw human moment to a regrettable error. Arnold felt a surge of something hot and defensive, but he clamped down on it. Professional distance. "Of course, sir," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Focus on Henderson. We have it handled here." He turned and left, closing the door softly. Behind him, the morning passed in a blur of controlled chaos. Arnold managed Julian's absence seamlessly, fielding calls, directing the support team, ensuring the office hummed with productive efficiency. He felt like a finely tuned instrument playing a familiar, demanding score. Yet a dull ache persisted. Beneath the surface, a sense of something precious and fragile being deliberately crushed. At 8:05 a.m., Julian emerged from his office, briefcase in hand, looking every inch the conquering CEO, heading to seal a victory. "Status all clear, sir. Car is waiting downstairs." Julian nodded. "Good, hold the fort." He strode towards the elevator bank, radiating purpose. Arnold watched him go, the ache sharpening. Then he saw it. Leaning against the coat stand near the reception desk, Julian's sleek black umbrella. He'd forgotten it. Chicago might be clear, but the downpour outside their building was still relentless. Instinct warred with caution. Let him get wet. It felt petty. Remind him? Risk another interaction, laden with the awkwardness of last night's lapse? Professionalism won. Julian would need it walking from the car to the terminal, Mr. Thorne. Arnold called, grabbing the umbrella and hurrying after him. Julian was just stepping into the elevator. He turned, his expression impatient. Arnold held out the umbrella. "You forgot this, sir?" Julian looked at the umbrella, then at Arnold. For a split second, the CEO mask slipped. Arnold saw it. A flicker of surprise, then something softer, almost chagrined, quickly buried. He reached out and took it, his fingers brushing Arnold's again. The contact was brief, but in the sterile elevator lobby, it felt like a live wire. "Right, thank you, Reeves." The crispness was back, but slightly frayed at the edges. He stepped into the elevator, the doors starting to close. His eyes held Arnold's for a suspended moment through the narrowing gap. Arnold saw not dismissal, but a complex tangle of gratitude, residual stress, and something else. An apology? Before he could decipher it, the doors slid shut with a soft hiss. Arnold stood alone in the lobby. The echo of the elevator's descent, a hollow sound in his chest. He touched his fingers where Julian's had brushed them. Lapse. The word felt inadequate, wrong. What had happened last night hadn't felt like a lapse. It had felt real. Painfully, dangerously real. The day crawled by. The Henderson signing call came through at 2:17 p.m. Successful, flawless. The office erupted in muted celebration. Congratulations. The internal communications. The press release draft with detached efficiency. He felt numb. Julian's victory felt distant, belonging to the CEO, not the man who had confessed to bailing out the Titanic. He was reviewing the press. Release draft for the third time when his phone buzzed with a direct line call. Julian's private cell. Arnold's heart jumped into his throat. "Reeves," he answered, keeping his voice level. "Arnold." Julian's voice sounded different. Not the crisp CEO tone, not the ragged exhaustion. Tired, yes, but also softer, relieved. "It's done. Signed. Congratulations, sir. Tremendous achievement." Arnold forced the professional enthusiasm. A pause. Arnold could hear airport sounds faintly in the background, announcements, the distant hum of crowds. "It was," Julian acknowledged. "Thanks in no small part to your groundwork." The packet was impeccable. Legal had nothing to add. Another pause, longer this time. The background noise faded, as if he'd moved somewhere quieter. I'm heading back tonight. The 7:45 p.m. flight. Should land around 10:30? I'll arrange the car, sir," Arnold said automatically. "Dulled?" Julian's voice lowered. Lost the last vestige of formality. "Don't. Not tonight." He took a breath. "I know it's late, and I know things were strained this morning." He hesitated, the silence stretching over the line, filled only by the faint static and Arnold's own pounding heartbeat.
But
"I don't want to go back to that empty penthouse just yet. Would you? Would you meet me? Somewhere quiet? Neutral ground? For a coffee? Or something stronger? I could use." He trailed off, the unspoken word hanging between them. "Company. Your company." Arnold's mind reeled. This was uncharted, dangerous territory. Meeting the boss socially? After hours? After the emotional minefield of the past 36 hours. After his dismissal of last night as a lapse, every professional instinct screamed no, but he heard the raw need in Julian's voice, stripped bare of CEO bravado. He remembered the tremor, the shadows, the whispered gratitude in the dark office. He thought of the forgotten umbrella, the fleeting look in the elevator. He closed his eyes. Professional distance. It felt like a lifeline he was about to cut. Where? Arnold heard himself ask, the word escaping before his rational mind could. Veto it. Relief palpable, even over the phone, flooded Julian's voice. There's a place. Quiet. Near the office. The Lantern, on 5th and Mercer. Know it. I'll find it, Arnold said, his voice surprisingly steady. Good. Julian sounded almost breathless. 10:45. I'll see you then. He paused again, and Arnold, thank you. For this, the line went dead. Arnold slowly lowered the phone. The press release draft blurred before his eyes. The Henderson deal was signed. The professional crisis was over, but the personal one. The one involving umbrella brushes, whispered names, and a late-night meeting at a quiet place called the Lantern. It was just beginning. The fragile truce of the morning had shattered, not with conflict, but with an invitation, Arnold knew. He shouldn't accept, but couldn't refuse. The rain had stopped outside, but the storm inside Arnold Reeves was just gathering force. He looked at the clock. 5 hours until 10:45 p.m. It felt like an eternity. Rain slicked the streets again, reflecting the neon glow of the city like spilled oil paints. Arnold stood under the awning of the Lantern, a discreet, low-lit bar, tucked between a bespoke tailor and a silent art gallery. 10:42 p.m. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic counterpoint to the rhythmic swish of passing cars. 3 hours ago, he'd been reviewing Henderson merger press releases. Now he was waiting for his billionaire CEO boss, who'd asked him for a drink after confessing he couldn't face his empty penthouse. Asterisk, this is professional suicide, a voice hissed in his mind. Asterisk, he called it a lapse. You're walking into a minefield. Asterisk, but the memory of Julian's raw, grateful voice on the phone, the utter weariness in his eyes last night, the unspoken plea asterisk I could use, drowned out the caution. He pushed open the heavy oak door. The inside was exactly as Julian had implied. Quiet, neutral ground. Dark wood, leather booths, soft jazz playing just above the murmur of a few late-night patrons. No corporate power plays here. It's just the warm glow of low-hanging lanterns and the scent of aged whiskey and coffee. Julian was already there. Not in a commanding center booth, but tucked into a corner nook, half hidden in shadow. He'd shed his suit jacket. His crisp white shirt was open at the collar, sleeves rolled up to the elbows, revealing strong forearms. He looked human. Tired, but the brittle intensity of the morning was gone. He nursed a tumbler of amber liquid, staring into it as if seeking answers. He hadn't seen Arnold yet. Arnold approached, his footsteps unnaturally loud on the wooden floor. Julian looked up. The weariness was still there, etched deep, but his eyes held a flicker of something else. Relief? Apprehension? Hope Arnold couldn't decipher it. Arnold, Julian said, his voice low, rough around the edges. He gestured to the seat opposite him. You came. You asked. Arnold replied simply. Sliding into the booth, leather was cool, the space intimate, the small table barely separating them. The air hummed with the unspoken weight of the past 2 days. A waiter materialized silently. Whiskey. Neat. Whatever he's having, Arnold said, nodding towards Julian's glass. He needed the fortification. Julian offered a ghost of a smile. The Macallan 18. Good choice. He waited until the waiter left before speaking again. His gaze fixed on Arnold. Thank you for coming. I know this is unconventional. He swirled the liquid in his glass. This morning, what I said, calling it a lapse. He shook his head, a muscle ticking in his jaw. It was unfair, dismissive. I was embarrassed. Scared, honestly. Arnold remained silent, letting him speak. His own whiskey arriving and providing a focal point, Julian took a deep breath, his eyes meeting Arnold's directly. It wasn't a lapse, Arnold. What you saw, what I let you see, that was real. The exhaustion, the feeling of drowning, the sheer relief of knowing you were there, holding things together. That is real. Every damn day. Took a sip, the whiskey seeming to steady him. The divorce finalizing yesterday. It wasn't a surprise, but it was a finality. A door slamming shut on 15 years. Even when it's necessary, even when it's right, it leaves a hole. And trying to navigate that hole while steering the Henderson deal felt like free fall. He looked down at his hands, then back up, his blue eyes starkly vulnerable in the lantern light. You were the only solid thing in that free fall. Arnold felt the words resonate deep within him, saw the truth of them in Julian's face, stripped bare of the CEO persona. I'm glad I could be there, Julian, he said, the use of the first name deliberate, testing the waters of this neutral ground, but where does that leave us? You're my boss. This he gestured between them, encompassing the booth. The confession, the charged intimacy, ... complicates things. Significantly. Julian leaned forward slightly, resting his forearms on the table. The distance between them shrank. I know, he said, his voice intense, low. Believe me, I've run through every ethical handbook, every potential HR disaster scenario since I hung up the phone with you. I know the power imbalance. I know the risks. He held Arnold's gaze, unwavering. But I also know what I feel when I walk into the office and see you already there, anticipating the chaos. I know the calm that settles over me when you handle. Something impossible with that quiet efficiency. I know. I know how it felt when you handed me that umbrella today. He paused, the memory hanging between them. And I know how it felt last night in the dark, knowing you were the only person I didn't have to pretend with. Arnold's breath caught. The raw honesty was disarming, terrifying, and exhilarating. He took a sip of his own whiskey, the smoky warmth spreading through him, mirroring the heat blooming in his chest. What are you saying? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. I'm saying the lapse wasn't a moment of weakness, Arnold. It was a moment of clarity, Julian said, his gaze burning into Arnold's. I'm saying, I see you. It's not just the impeccable executive assistant. I see the intelligence, the dry wit you try to hide, the fierce loyalty, the quiet strength that holds me up. He reached across the small table, not touching, but his hand resting palm up. An invitation suspended in the air between their glasses. I'm saying I want to explore this. Whatever this is. Carefully, honestly. Outside the office. Away from titles and power dynamics. As Julian and Arnold. The silence stretched, thick with the weight of the leap he was proposing. Arnold looked at Julian's hand, then back into his eyes, seeing the hope warring with fear, the vulnerability laid bare. He saw the powerful CEO, yes, but more importantly, he saw the man beneath, wounded, weary, but reaching out with startling courage. He thought of the forgotten umbrella, the shared exhaustion, the unspoken trust that had built brick by brick over 6 months. He thought of the terrifying freefall Julian described, and the unexpected pull he felt to be the one beside him, not just professionally, but wholly. Professional distance. It felt like a life raft he no longer wanted. The risk was immense, potential fallout catastrophic. But the alternative, walking away from this connection, from this man looking at him with such raw, hopeful honesty, felt like a different kind of death. Slowly, deliberately, Arnold placed his hand in Julian's. The touch was electric. A jolt of warmth and certainty that silenced the last whispers of doubt. Julian's fingers closed around his, strong, warm, anchoring. Carefully, Arnold echoed, his voice finding strength. As Julian and Arnold, slow, breathtaking smile spread across Julian's face, transforming the weariness into radiant relief and joy, he didn't let go of Arnold's hand. Yes. He breathed, his thumb brushing lightly over Arnold's knuckles. One step at a time. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing the city clean. Inside the lantern, under the soft golden light, The rigid structures of their world dissolved. The Henderson deal was signed. The corporate battle was won. But here, in this quiet corner booth, hands clasped over whiskey glasses, a different, far more personal journey was just beginning. The leap had been taken. The free fall was over. Now they would learn to fly together. Arnold looked at Julian, really looked at him, not as his boss, but as the man holding his hand, and felt the first tentative flutter of wings. The future was terrifyingly uncertain, gloriously unknown, and for the first time in a long time, filled with a light that felt like coming home.